This is Kim Nelson with the Fashion Institute of Technology, Jewelry Design Department. This is a tutorial to go along with our control point editing content. Normally I give two projects to go with this. One of them is a simple dome earring, and the other one is the spoon. I wanted to add one that I don't normally do. I want to show you how you can use control point editing and flow along curve to create sculptural prongs. First thing I'm going to do is rotate this setting. So that it sits in a cruciform orientation. Okay, so start of rotation is 0. Beginning of rotation, I want it to go along with where the prongs are now, which is 45 degrees. Which if I hit grid snap, I can just grab that corner. Turn grid snap off, hold shift key down. There. Going to put these prongs on. I'll hide them for now. And that gives us these two. Alright. Now I want a prong wire that runs right down the middle of this. This is a very old file, so it undoubtedly has one somewhere in it, but I'll show you how to reconstitute that information. We need to get section tool right here. Pull straight across, and that'll give me a cross section of that prong. Since I had selected it, I'll do that again. I pre-selected the prong section, grid snap, so I can pull straight across. That gives me this. If I go to the front C-plane, I'm about to do an offset. All transforms are C-plane dependent, so I have to do that. Through point option, grid snap off. If I grab the middle of that line, I have come close. I've at least offset it halfway here. Now my next option would be, I have two. One, I can offset it from here to the midpoint down below. Okay? And that will give me a different one. The problem is the prong is tapered. Okay? So finding its center point is a bit of a challenge. What's the middle at the bottom isn't the middle at the top. Okay? So what I'm going to do, I can keep offsetting and offsetting and offsetting until I get what I want, but the easiest route to go with this is going to be to scale this so that it comes to that midpoint. To do that, I will use a non-uniform scale. Grab the end of the prong. This is the direction I want to scale it, which is the direction that's currently active. And that's not going to give me what I want. Sadly, it isn't. Okay, so I get to think out loud while you listen to me. I'm going to see what a regular scale would look like. Okay. A regular scale, you can tell a regular scale by just drawing a radius circle from the beginning. And if you can get the two things that you want in contact with this, the end of that curve and where I want it to be, you can scale it the way you want it. So I'm going to extend that curve. This is pre-selected, so Rhino sees it as a boundary. We don't often use that in class, so let me show you. Select boundary objects. Enter. Select what you want to extend. Enter when done. Okay? So now I have this. And since I have the end of the curve on the circle, I have the intersection where I want it to go on the circle, in theory at least, I can do a regular 3D scale. Would also work with a 2D scale, but with a flat curve on a C-plane, I don't need to use 2D scale. I'm going to need an intersect. Okay, no. Scale is not going to work, so I'll do a rotate. This same circle, of course, works for a rotation. And that will give me what I want. Fine. That's close enough to the midline to suit my needs. I'm going to make sure it's 4 control points. It's not. It's 11. I like prong wires to always be 4-3. That's going to change that a bit. So maybe in this case I'll make an exception, and I'll stick with like 410. Yeah, that's fine. Alright, all of that just to get a curved wire down the center of our pipe, of our prong. Okay, now I am, for what I'm going to do, it's going to be important to me that this is pretty much the proper length. It could be a little long because it's going to, if I wanted to go onto the ring shank, for example, it would need to be a little long. But if I were doing that, frankly, class, I would do this after I had this in situ on the ring shank. So no, I actually do want it flush with the bottom of this. Top C-plane, section again, grab that bottom gallery wire, straight across, turn off the purple layer, front C-plane, curve tools, line, tangent, 2 curves. That'll create a curve that is tangent to 2 curves. Select first curve near tangent point. Select second curve near tangent point. Didn't do anything. That means we have a perfect, usually that means that we have perfect quadrants. Oh, there we go. It worked. Fine. So that's the length. Fillet curve. Throw that away. Throw these away. And there is my final curve for my final prong. I need to know how long that is. 6.143. Since we're going to do a flow curve, flow along curve command, we need that to be exactly the same. 6.143. Okay. Doesn't matter where it's located, it just matters that it is the same length. I'll actually put it over here using grid snap. Now, it is also helpful if it has the same math. I'm going to rebuild this again. Trimming it is going to change the curve points a little bit. Yes, it did. Back to 10.4. And make this one 10.4 as well. So if I turn the control points on, they're going to look very similar. That just gives me the best possible match. Curious what size this prong is. It's been a long time since I made it. I don't even know. So let's find out. I'm going to do a solid pipe. Use mid-snap. Actually, the snap's just getting in my way. Oh, I have grid on, that's why. No, it's not going to work for the snap, so I'll just do it by eye. I'll just look and see how big that was. This is an unusual prong, by the way, class. This is a traditional handmade prong, which actually flares in width from the side, but tapers in width from the end. Okay. We can duplicate that if we wish. I'm not going to go through a lot of trouble to do that right now. But why not? Let's try it. Rotate where I'm kind of looking from the side. Of course, Rhino hates that because it can't see what I'm doing. Close enough. Okay. Problem with that is that I don't know how big it is. Analyze radius. Top is a diameter or of 0.945, radius of 473. Bottom is 1.17. So I'll make it 0.95 and 1.15. Pipe over here. Bottom one is 1.15 diameter. Top one is 0.95 diameter. That's my new prong. I'm going to explode it because I don't want the caps. I can throw those away. Where the seam on this surface is important. You can always see the seam is a little bolder. This is actually exactly where I want the seam. I want it on the inside. So that's good. I like that. And the math of this thing is not going to be very good for deforming. I'm going to want to sculpt this with control points, and right now I really don't have a lot of control points in any direction, which is going to make it difficult for me. Turn on the control points. Right now it is at 4 and 8. The 8 is the V, signified by those green arrows. I'm going to increase that to 12. And then the lengthwise, I'm going to also rebuild a 12. 4, 4. Let's take a look at it. Seam didn't move. That's important. It's really important to me that I have a point right in the center at the back, and I don't. Okay. I have symmetry because I used 12, but I'm not getting what I want there. So I'm going to rebuild it again, and did the rebuild. This time I'm going to go with 8 in the V direction and 12. Turn on the points. I have the same problem. It has the orientation of these points offset from the seam in such a way that it's making it very hard for me to get a seam point where I want it, in the back here. And when you're doing control point editing, the grain, where the control points are, is very important. I'm going to rebuild it to 9. 12. See, that gives me that row of points down the back. So the odd number provides me with a control point down the back seam, down the back ridge of the prong. I'm going to want more points than this eventually, but this is a good place to start. Put this on a different color layer than the prong wire. Green's always nice. Okay, excuse me. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to flow this prong along the curve using history. Record history, transform, flow along curve. Select objects to flow, the prong, enter. Base curve, the straight curve, enter. Oh, made a mistake, sorry. Select objects to flow, select base curve, one end, select target curve, one end. Okay. Now anything that I do to this is going to happen over here. Make sure my history took. Yes, it did. I'm going to record history again. Go into my top C plane into a polar array. Make sure my history is still intact. Yes, it is. Now I can sculpt these prongs to do basically whatever I want. I would like to have this rail for reference, so I will bring it over into dark blue color. Okay, so now we have 4 prongs, we have our bottom rail for reference. I can now play with the sculptural quality of the prong. Whenever you do curve edit pointing, control point editing, it's really nice to have this selection tool out. Cascade, the lasso button, and these two select U and V. We know that V in this case goes around the parameter, so if I hit V, it'll select all the way around. If I select a point and hit U, it'll select its length all the way down the prong, which is what we want. I'm going to grab these 2 rows of points symmetrically. Okay? And I'm going to do a non-uniform scale. I need an origin point. And for the origin point, I can either use a center snap for the surface itself, but actually what I'm going to choose is the end. I do not want to scale this direction, so I will hit 1, enter, to keep that the same. By the way, that crazy artifact visually means nothing. I'm going to stretch those out, and I don't want anything to happen in the z-axis. And you'll see what the prong did. Okay? I want to move these forward a bit, and you'll see that the prong updated automatically. Going to non-uniform scale them again. And once more. Okay. Going to move these forward again. Oh, hit N enter, sorry. Move M enter, like Michael. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to curve these prongs around the base. I'm going to select these two rows, select U, going to non-uniform scale them. No change there, but I want to flatten out the inside a little bit. That's just going to make it so I can have a prettier shape. Now that these prongs stand far enough apart, I can actually drag a window around them. This is much more dangerous than using the U and V button, because if you drag just slightly off, you will miss some prongs and bad things will happen. So don't do that unless you feel very confident. Use these two buttons instead. No change. Yes change. Okay. And I pretty much have made contact now. Okay. Decide if I want to make a little more contact. I think I do. And I'm going to move them forward to create a little bit more of that cupped feeling that I want. See how that broke through? I don't want it to really break through very much, so I'm using Shift key so that these move only in one direction. Once I see that start to peek through, I will stop. Actually, I'll back that up a little bit. Okay. Would be nice to have more of a gradual curve through here. So select U, non-uniform scale. That just makes these a little thicker through here. Okay. In fact, I'm going to do that some more. Okay. That gives me some nice thickness here. All right. But what it's also doing is really flattening it off in the middle, which I don't necessarily want to do. I do not have a control point right here at the moment to change that with. I am likely to rebuild this and provide that eventually, but for now I'm going to stop. And it took me very little time to create these very unusual cleated sort of prongs. I would like to now taper this prong. Okay, I would like to have a reference for how wide that originally was, and I have lost it. Okay, so I'm going to undo all the way back to here. I'm going to select this prong, Control C, copy it outside of Windows, and then redo till there's nothing more to redo, and then I'll paste it. And I'll actually put that on the dark blue layer with the gallery wire. That's just a nice visual reference to know what my original prong size was. I'm going to go ahead and lock this layer so I don't select it accidentally. I'm going to use a transform command we have not used before. I'm going to use taper. Transforms are C-plane dependent. What I want to do is taper this so it's narrower at the top and wider at the bottom in a rather uniform way. Okay? So since I know that's the direction I want to taper, I want to look at it from this side as I taper. I need to see a C-plane behind me, like so. If I wanted to taper from this side, So say that it got narrower at the top and wider at the bottom, I'd want to rotate it and put the proper C-plane behind it. Okay? If I wanted to taper it from one side to the other, so this side stays fat and that side stays narrow, then I would want to rotate it to where I could see what I wanted to do, and then put a C-plane behind it, my top C-plane in this case. But I know I want to go from here, so put my right C-plane behind me. Transform. Taper. Taper asks for an axis. The beginning of the axis is the part that you don't want to change. Okay? So I want the bottom to stay the same. End is here. Okay? And I do want it to be flat, meaning that it only tapers in one direction, in one dimension. And I want infinite, yes, just because that gives a nicer quality of taper. And then I start, click, bring it into the width I think that I want it, and hit enter. Okay? That's pretty nice. That's a good starting point. I want to further taper it, but I want to taper it now in a controlled way. Much more controlled and detailed than what I was just doing. So I can go back to my top C-plane, turn back on my control points. I've got to decide what range I want to play with here of points. I want to play with this range of points. I'm going to look around to make sure that I got all of them. And actually, I think I will go back to my right C-plane, just because it'll make it easier for me to see what I'm doing. Going to do my non-uniform scale again. Going to grab the end point of that line. It's the only end available. These prongs aren't ends. I mean, these points. Only end I've got is the back of the seam, or the top of the seam, or the top of the curve, and both would work fine. This does happen to be the direction I want to scale. What I'm going to look at is this bottom row of points. Scale it to where I like. Stop. Y, I want to stay 1, so I'll type in 1. Z, I want to stay 1, so I just hit enter, because it's already at 1. I'm going to deselect that row of points and repeat the process. Deselect that row of points. Repeat the process. Actually, something was happening there I didn't understand. I want to repeat this narrower. I want that to stay 1, that to stay 1. Okay. Now something has happened here. I want you to notice something. I have torsioning, I have twisting going on. That should not happen. I want to know where it came from. It happened in my taper. Okay? Now there's no reason that taper should have done that, and I have a theory as to why it did. When you get a nice flat taper, usually you see a straight line coming out the side. Rhino 5 has made a choice that many of us disagree with. In all your basic Rhino training courses, they have you work in the orthographic, non-perspective viewports. and then use the perspective viewport to look at what you're doing. Every professional model maker I know works exclusively in the perspective viewport and only uses orthographic views when absolutely necessary. To favor their teaching style, Rhino makes the default for a lot of these transforms that they be done in the orthographic viewport, largely to avoid making students think about construction planes. Okay, I find that crazy, but that's what they've done. So to make this work properly, we're going to have to go into the right C-plane. I'm actually going to leave it wireframe because it'll make it easier for me to see. No, I don't want non-uniform scale. I want taper. I want to go from the end to the end. I want it flat. I want it infinite. And oddly enough, it's doing the same thing. I should be able to get a very nice just cancel out. I'm going to start it in this window. Give me a minute. I've been using this for years. This is an important command to be able to use when I need to. It's not scaling flat, it's scaling in a twisted way, which I can't allow it to do. I need to keep clean symmetry. See, this line right now should be forced into an orthographic orientation, and it's not. More unusual still. When I hold down my shift key, it forces it up and down, which makes no sense at all. That's completely not in connection with the construction plane. I have to say, class, I am concerned. This should be a very straightforward taper. There. Okay. I go halfway into the command, then change viewports, and it works like it's supposed to. And it does not look like it twisted. Okay, so yes, how crazy is that? To delineate or explain, hopefully, what just happened is what matters now in the new Rhino 5 version of taper is that I go to an orthographic viewport when I start picking my point, my start and end point. Before that, I should actually be in the perspective viewport. They have a very specific way in mind that you use this as far as the viewports are concerned, which makes no sense. So once again, start the taper axis where you don't want it to change. End it where you do. Okay? Then go into the appropriate orthographic viewport. Make sure it's set to flat yes, infinite yes. and pull inward till you get a nice taper. And that gives you the predictable taper that we were after. Crazy. All right. As we were. Turn on the control points. Drag a selection around what I think I want my taper area to encompass. I can drag a window because there's nothing behind that. I used a window selection. Window selection will only grab what it entirely encompasses. And all this there that it entirely can encompasses those points. If I did a crossing selection, it would have selected everything. Okay. But by doing a window selection, it only grabs what I completely surround. Non-uniform scale. End. Taper in a little bit. Take this row of points out. Taper in a little bit. Take that row of points out. Take a look at what I've got in perspective. Take this row of points out. Do the same thing again. Okay. I like that. Okay, that's nice. Now, if I want to do more sculpting, which in this case I do, I would like to bring the top of this prong back to a fairly rounded cross-section. While I like this cross-section at the bottom, I don't necessarily like it at the top. Okay? So, I'm going to grab a selection of points at the top. Alright. I want to only grab these two rows. I'm going to do my select U. But I only want roughly the top 3 rows. So I'll hold the control key, drag a window, get that. I want to move them this way, so I'm going to need my top C-plane. M-enter, move. Okay. I want to achieve the same thing with these. I can just grab these top 3 rows by hand, holding down the shift key, making sure I get 3 on both sides. Move. Going to grab these 3, both sides. Move. Going to come back, take these 3. And move. Okay. That's giving me a really fat back on the prong, which I don't necessarily want. Non-uniform scale. And I don't want to change that direction, so hit enter. 1 enter. But I do want to change this. And then 1 enter for the last direction. That's pretty nice. Grab these 3. Move them up. Okay. Grab these 3. Do a non-uniform scale. Flare them out a little bit. move them up a little bit. Grab these three on each side. And do a non-uniform scale. Bring them in a little bit. That's a pretty nice prong cross section. I could finesse it more, but I'm happy with that. But what I have now is a very extreme shift in form, which I don't want. This is what I want at the top. This is what I want at the bottom. But I don't want that kind of craziness in between. That's where we do some careful sculpting. And what we're going to do is look at the lines of the points. Okay, if I select you, you can see what that is doing. Okay? We want to take some of that out. So we pick which direction we're going to change first. Be very systematic. I want to do the moving first. So I'm going to move these so that that little dotted yellow line transitions in. But now you can see they're quite a bit wider than these are, so I'll do my non-uniform scale. I don't want that direction. 1 enter. I want this direction. I will bring them in and then Z, so that the taper is gradual. Okay? So I've made both of those steps more gradual. These 2 points, you can see that they form a... Now you can, it's tedious though, so I won't even show you how. Just use your eyes and look carefully. There are ways you can hide geometry so it's easier to look at, but the extra time it takes you for the benefit it gives is really not worth it. And something as simple, I know it doesn't seem simple right now looking at this, but as control point models go, this is quite simple. Okay, I'm going to grab those 2 points, the twins, and do the same thing. I'm going to move them so they come more in line this way. And actually, they don't need to be scaled. They're actually pretty nice. I'm going to grab these 2. Going to bring them in, or up front a little bit, so that I get that in. These do need to be scaled out. See how this kinks in and then kinks out to the next point? Goes in, then out. We don't want that. So I will scale that out a little bit. That's smoother. Okay. These points don't bother me. Okay, that first row of points already went quite a long ways. I'll emap this as our reference. Already went quite a long ways towards smoothing that out. It needs more. Okay, so I'll grab the next row, this row. Grab these 2 points, move them forward so I get more smoothness, non-uniform scale them from side to side, once again, so I get a little more smoothness. Okay. Grab these 2, move them forward so I don't have such a peak. Grab these guys who are hanging in the back, move them forward. Once again, they don't need to have much done to them beyond that. These 2, I'm going to move forward a little bit. I think they're good. Okay, that second row, did a lot to smooth that out. Going to do one more row. I might do 2 more rows, we'll see. I'll do as many as I think need to be done. Bring that forward. I don't need to non-uniform scale those anymore. Just forward is enough. Move these forward. I'm going to let a little bit of that peak remain because it becomes important toward the bottom. I'm going to move these 2 forward. And I'm starting to get a smoothness along the back here. This is starting to scoop in, which is actually an important part. I don't want to get rid of the scooping. I just want it to transition smoothly into the scooping. So there's that row. That prong is looking pretty good. Alright. I will take these 2 points and move them forward. Not a lot. Just a little. And that smooths that portion of what I wanted to do. Okay? Now, I would like these to come closer together on the sides to fill that in, but that becomes a very complicated thing to do. What I would do is pick about the elevation that I think I want. Do my non-uniform scale from the top. I don't want to change this direction, but I want to change this direction. It's really hard because this looks really crazy in here until you click. And then it actually shows what you're doing. I'm going to pull this out a fair amount. Yes, that is somewhat what I want to see happen. So I'm going to do it some more. You want to rough sculpt first and then smooth afterwards. I know I have a kink in here. I can see it in the control points. That doesn't bother me. I know that I can move that and transition it. I want to grab this whole row of points all the way around, and I want to move it up. So I'm going to need to go into a vertical C-plane. See what that does. Okay. And back to top C-plane, back to these 2 points. Non-uniform scale. Okay. That's pretty good. So now I'm going to do a little bit of blending. It's not hard to do. All I've done is non-uniform scales. I did one move. I won't need to do the move again. Just a couple of non-uniform scales and you're looking at these, at the points themselves. You're looking at how they come in. Okay, that's more normal. And grab these 2 and do the same thing with them. Okay. And I have this coming together here. If I would like to have that swoop out, should be kind of nice. I'll grab these 2, non-uniform scale. And that'll give me a bit of a movement like that in the prong, which is fine. Okay. So yeah, that's one of the things you can do. That's one of the ways you can work. Alright, you can sculpt using control points anywhere in your model. But when you do, remember that what you're keeping in mind is the grain of the control points. Okay, the number of the control points, you want to start off with fewer and add more as you need them. I didn't actually go through the trouble of adding more points because I've kept the form pretty simple. But if I wanted to, I certainly could have. Make your bold statements first, then come in and refine the form with blending. If you try and start and blend everything as you go, it will take you forever, and you will lose track of what it was you were trying to do. Okay? Look at your form. If you ever watch a person doing animation type modeling, they're always revolving it like this, looking for things that they would like to tweak a little bit, and then taking advantage of it. A symmetrical point layout. Don't lose your symmetry. Don't let it get twisted. If it does, like it did to me in the beginning, you have to go back and find out why. You can't just keep modeling. Okay? Lovely. Okay? That works fine. Now, the only thing I would do beyond here is I would possibly do a blend surface so I can get these nice and smooth. And to do that, I would get an intersection. Okay. And I would use these to create a pipe. I'd make that pipe as big as I reasonably can, actually. If I make it too big, it's going to fail because that wire, it can't overlap itself very much. So I've got that. I'll explode it, deselect the main surface, delete the caps. I want to extend these so they reach beyond. Okay. I'll go ahead and mirror this over. I can delete these. Wireframe so I can see. Trim. Okay. I broke my history. I'm through sculpting now. Because I touched the child. And that's it. If you mess with the child at all, you've lost history. Okay. Array polar. I now have that lovely gap, which I will fill with a blend. Blend surface. Click at the same end. Turn on preview. You can adjust this. I usually adjust it uniformly, especially if so you lock this. And this slider gives you control. But usually what Rhino comes up with on its own is nice. Same height can make it more rigid. A little more metal feeling, if you will. That's nice. Okay. Now, it's going to seem a little crazy, but what I do now, even though it fits nicely at the bottom here, kind of, I'm going to extend these. I'm going to extend them by millimeters, fine. I'm going to grab this polar array. Join these together. lost it already, but I had gone through the trouble to create a curve right at the bottom of that wire. I'm going to need to get that curve back. Don't need these anymore. Unlock so I can select section, grid snap, straight across, turn that off, front C-plane, line, tangent, two curves, take that line, scale it from its midpoint, just so it gets long. And that's only so I can see it easily. Grab this, surface tools, section, end, pull straight over, trim. Okay. We have a little bit of an issue, but it's going to be fine because this actually intersects it. To trim off the rest of these, we would actually do it with the wire itself. Okay. All right, we don't need this anymore. And this is actually a problem. I actually have an issue here, and that is that none of those surfaces reach down far enough on the inside to do what I need them to do, because we're not going to leave the wire in place. This will not have a gallery wire on the bottom when it's finished. So to resolve that issue, actually I do want to keep that, copy that out. Extend surface. I'm going to go ahead and extend that out so that it was long enough. Actually, I don't need to do that. I can just grab these two and array them. And join it all together. Nope, that didn't work. Doesn't think it wants to join those now. It's alright. I suspect once I trim the bottoms off, I'll be okay. I hope. Okay. Fine. Because I extended the surfaces, the blend surfaces no longer fit. So I'll just repeat that step. Okay. I just hit that. I am going to go ahead and extend the bottom of it again. Just because experience has taught me that if I don't, it won't line up at the end of the day. Array polar. join. And cap. Cap planar holes, and there. Finish setting. Very sculptural setting made from using flow along surface and control point editing. Alright, thanks for watching.